Hey guys, it is Adrian over BHA here bringing you a new video. So I was playing around with different components in Home Assistant and I realized that I'd never really set up the Google Hangouts component. And obviously I don't use Google Hangouts that often. I communicate with a few people using Hangouts, but for the most part it's just not something I use a lot of. But I know that there are people that do use Google Hangouts a lot. And so I thought it'd be cool to set it up in Home Assistant and show you how you can have Home Assistant send you notifications to Google Hangouts. And then also we can even send a message through Google Hangouts to Home Assistant for the most part. And Home Assistant can control devices. It's pretty cool. So this is Google Hangouts in Home Assistant. Let's check it out. So you basically will have a Google Hangouts account by default if you have a Gmail account. But we're going to basically create a new Google Hangouts account specifically for Home Assistant to use only. And again, I hope you guys are staying safe and performing social distancing, as we continue through all of this and hopefully get back to normal very, very soon. So let's do a quick run through everything we're going to cover in this video. Alright, so for starters, we're going to create a new Hangouts account to use specifically for Home Assistant. Once we do that, then we just need to basically generate a conversation or start a conversation between our Home Assistant Hangouts account and your regular everyday use Hangouts account, if that makes sense. So basically for this setup, you're going to have two Hangouts accounts. One that Home Assistant will use and then one that you will use. Once we do that, we're going to add our Hangouts integration into Home Assistant. Once it's added and we've restarted Home Assistant, then we are going to get our conversation ID, the conversation specifically between our main Hangouts account and our Home Assistant Hangouts account. After that, we're going to create a test notification script that we can use to kind of test out sending notifications from Home Assistant. And then I'll show you what that looks like in action. After that, we're going to set up an intent and intent script. And we will be using this to send Hangouts messages to Home Assistant and have it control devices in our house. Kind of cool. And lastly, of course, I'll show you what that looks like in action. So let's get started. Alright, so again, for starters, you need two Hangouts accounts for this to work properly. One for Home Assistant and one for yourself. So you'll go to hangouts.google.com and create a new account. I already have my account set up, so I'm not going to go through this whole process, but obviously it's pretty simple. You're just creating a new Google account. You might put Home Assistant or something in the name if you want, just so you can keep up with it. Once you have your account set up, then you're ready to move on to the next step. Alright, so like I said, we need to have a conversation going between these two Hangouts accounts. So as you can see here, I'm logged in with my Home Assistant Hangouts account. And as you can see, I've already started a conversation between the two accounts, but basically you would just start a new conversation, you'd select the new account, and you would send it a message. Once you started that conversation and you have communication between those two accounts, we're ready to move on to the next step. Alright, so adding the integration for Hangouts in Home Assistant should be pretty simple. They have an actual integrations in the configuration section there where we can add the Google Hangouts account. So we're going to try that first. It does state here that there may be some other authentication codes that we'll need if this doesn't work properly. So let's get started and see what we get. So we're going to go to integrations. We'll go to Google Hangouts. I'm going to put in the email address of my newly created Google Hangouts account, and then the password. And of course it says invalid login, please try again. So at this point we need to follow that other process, which would include getting the authorization code. So if you look back over here, steps for obtaining the authorization code, it says to click on this URL, and then of course we're going to log in with that new Hangouts account. And then it says hit F12, and we're going to go looking for application, and then let's see, under cookies we're going to click on accounts.google.com, and then down at the bottom there it says OAuth_code. So basically that's the code that we need for this authorization code in Home Assistant. So we're going to click on that and copy it. Then we're going to go back over here to Home Assistant and try to add our Google Hangouts integration again. So we'll put in our email address and our password. And then, of course, we're going to paste that authorization code in here. And success. It says it's created a configuration for my newly set up Hangouts account. All right, so we're ready to move on to the next step. All right, so we need to get our conversation ID. There's probably several ways to go about doing this, but we're going to go to Developer Tools. We'll just kind of do a search here for hangouts.conversations. And as you can see, here's the component. Looks like it has one conversation because I don't use this account for anything else other than just send notifications to myself. So it has an ID there. This ID is the ID that you will need for this. So we're going to copy it and save it somewhere because we're going to use it in our the rest of our configuration. But basically that's it for this step. We just needed to get that conversation ID so we have it for the next step. Alright, so we are ready to create a test notification script that we'll use to just kind of show you how Home Assistant can send you notifications. You'll be able to use this with automations or whatever you want to use it with. I mean, this is just to give you an example of how this might work. Now, this is a two-step process because even though we've created the Hangouts integration, we still have to add a notification component or notify component for Hangouts. Not really sure why that's not part of the integration setup, but oh well. So we're going to start by editing our notify.yaml file because this is where all of my notify components are. Find an open spot down here at the bottom. Carve out a little section for Hangouts. So for the platform, it will be Hangouts. And for the name, I'm just going to call it Hangouts. I don't need to have a special name for this. Default conversations. This is where we're going to list out that conversation ID. So we'll put ID : and since I saved my Hangouts ID in my secrets.yaml file here, I'll do an exclamation secret and then Hangouts_ID. Once we have all that in there, we can go ahead and save it. And now we are ready to create our test script. So we'll do a sudo vi testscripts.yaml file, edit my little test scripts file here, and find an open spot down here at the bottom for this. I'm just going to call this one test Hangouts notify. Again, you call it whatever you want. Alias, test Hangouts notification. For the service, it's going to be notify.hangouts because that's the new component that I just created. And then let's see, data, and then message. I'm just going to say this is a test message, just something simple to to see how this is going to work. Once we have all that in there, we'll go ahead and save it. We're going to jump over to the web interface here. We'll do a check configuration just to make sure everything checks out okay. And then, of course, we're going to restart Home Assistant for these changes to take effect. We'll give that a second to come back up and then move on to the next step. Alright, so let's just see what this test notification looks like in action. As you can see here on the left, I have the test script. On the right, I have my phone, which has my Hangouts account set up. And we're just going to hit execute. And as you can see, I immediately got a message. This is a test. Pretty simple. So obviously you can have it send you alerts, whatever you want. I mean, just depends on how much you use Hangouts, or if Hangouts is something that you like to use for all of your notifications. And obviously this is on an iPhone, but it would work on Android or anything else as long as you have a Hangouts account set up on your device. And you can send images with this as well. I didn't test it with an actual image in the notification, but you could add an image URL into the notification as well, and it would send that image. So pretty cool. All right, let's move on to the next step. Alright, so we are ready to set up our intent and intent script that we will use just for kind of playing around with this and showing you how you can use Hangouts to control devices from Home Assistant. Normally, you would probably want to create your own YAML files and separate this stuff out if you were going to add a whole bunch of these intents. But since I'm just doing the one kind of as an example, I'm just going to add it straight into my configuration.yaml file here. So I'm going to do a sudo vi configuration.yaml. Find an open spot down here towards the bottom. For this first section, it's called Hangouts. And then we're going to say intents. And then I'm going to give that intent a name. So the example I'm using is turning off my bedroom lights. So again, I just called it turn off bedroom lights. You can call your intent whatever you want. Now under sentences, this is where you would list out all these sentences that you would want to use from Hangouts to be able to turn off the bedroom lights. So, I mean, you could even make it as simple as off bedroom lights if you wanted. But I mean, made one sentence in here. I said turn off the bedroom lights. But you could have multiple ways to say it, and you would want to list each of those out here under sentences. All right, now we need to add our intent script. So this section is intent_script. And again, we're going to call that same intent that we just called. So it's turn off bedroom lights. And let's see, for speech text, this is going to be the response that Home Assistant will send back to you, letting you know that it completed the task. For the text, I'm just going to say the bedroom lights are now off. And then under action, of course, we're just going to call out that light switch to turn it off. So we'll say service is light.turn_off. And then under data, the entity ID will be the entity for my bedroom light. Once we have all that in there, we can go ahead and save it. And again, we're going to jump back over to Home Assistant one time, check our configuration, and then, of course, restart Home Assistant one last time for these changes to take effect. Then we're ready to move on to the next step. Alright, so here is this last part. So as you can see on the left here, I have Hangouts pulled up, and this is the conversation between myself and Home Assistant basically. And then on the right is my bedroom light. And so I'm just going to say turn off the bedroom lights. And as you can see here, it shot back, the bedroom lights are now off, and of course the lights turned off. So pretty cool. That's it. And again, you could set it up to do it however you wanted to. You could have a separate script to turn them back on if you want, or you could change that script to, instead of just turning it off, having it toggle the bedroom lights. So if they're off, they would turn them on. If they're on, they'd turn them off. And then you could do other stuff as well. You could say, what is the temperature in the bedroom? And you could have, Home Assistant send you a Hangouts message back telling you what the temperature was. So lots of cool ideas there. Lots of cool stuff you could do with that. Playing around with intents and everything. And you can get carried away with it real quick by creating just tons and tons of intents and stuff that you can use. But it's fun to kind of play around with. And of course, if you're stuck at home right now, to give you something to do. So that's the end of the video, guys. Let's do a quick run through of everything we covered in this video. So of course, for starters, we created a new Hangouts account that was specifically used for Home Assistant. Once we did that, then of course we started a conversation between your main Hangouts account and your newly created Home Assistant account. After we did that, we added the Hangouts integration into Home Assistant. Once that was added, then we went and got that conversation ID that we would be using to communicate between Home Assistant and ourselves. Next, we created a test notification script just to kind of show you how Home Assistant could send you notifications to Hangouts. After that, then we set up an intent and an intent script that we used to be able to control devices by sending a message from Hangouts. And then, of course, lastly, I showed you what that looks like in action. That's the end of the video, guys. Again, this is probably not something that you will use very often, but I'm sure some people do use Hangouts quite a bit. And if you do, then this is something cool that you can kind of play around with. If nothing else, you're sitting at home being bored, this will give you something to do as well. Again, I want to thank everybody that has donated to my Buy Me a Coffee link. I really appreciate it. Every little bit helps. If you liked the video, please subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comments below. As always, if there are any videos out there that you would like to see that I don't already have out there, let me know in the comments as well, and I will see if I can't get something put together for you guys. Otherwise, I'll see you guys around. Thanks.